Hey Reddit, I'm Daniel, 38, and last month, I finally learned what my marriage was really about. It wasn't love. It wasn't partnership. It was a business deal. A deal where I paid the bills, and in return, my wife got to live in luxury. And the second I stopped playing along, she lost her mind. It started with a conversation that should have been simple. I was sitting at the dining table, looking over our expenses when I realized something. I was bleeding money. Not on essentials, not on things we needed, but on our lifestyle. Designer bags, five-star restaurants, beauty treatments that cost more than my monthly car payment. And for the first time, I actually sat down and did the math. And what I found, it made my stomach turn. That night, I brought it up, casually, because I thought, stupidly, that my wife would understand. I set down the financial statement and looked at her. Hey, babe, I was going through her spending, and I think we need to scale back a little. She barely looked up from her phone. Scale back on what? I exhaled. On everything, really. The shopping, the dinners, the trips. It's adding up fast. She blinked at me. Then she laughed, like I had just told her the funniest joke of her life. You're serious? She scoffed. Daniel, we're fine. You make plenty. I clenched my jaw, because yeah, I made good money. But that wasn't the point. I was watching my hard-earned cash get thrown at things that meant nothing. And the second I even suggested we slow down, she laughed in my face. That was the first red flag. But the next thing she said, that was the moment I knew. She rolled her eyes and said, Your job is to provide, Daniel. My job is to enjoy it. I froze. Because wow, she actually said it out loud. She actually admitted it. In her mind, I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a partner. I was a paycheck. And suddenly, I saw everything differently. I leaned back, staring at her, because for the first time, I saw her for who she really was. And I didn't say a word, because now I had a plan. She thought I'd keep working endlessly to fund her lifestyle. She thought I'd never say no. She thought she had me trapped, but she was about to learn something very important. She didn't marry a wallet. She married a man who knew how to walk away. And when I finally did, she never saw it coming.
I sat there, staring at my wife as her words echoed in my head. Your job is to provide, Daniel. My job is to enjoy it. That was it. That was how she saw our marriage. Not as a partnership, not as a team, but as a one-sided deal where I paid for her life, and she did whatever she wanted. And the worst part? I let it happen. That realization hit me like a truck. For years, I had worked my ass off to make sure she had everything she wanted. I took on extra hours when she wanted a new car. I picked up more contracts when she insisted on that luxury vacation. I spent weekends at the office so she could shop without a second thought. And in return, she saw me as nothing more than a walking bank account. But what she didn't realize was that I had reached my limit. And now, I was about to show her exactly what happened when I stopped funding her life. I didn't argue with her that night. Didn't yell. Didn't fight. Didn't try to make her see my side. Because what was the point? She had already made it clear where she stood. So instead, I made a decision. A silent, cold decision. And from that moment on, I started cutting her off. One luxury at a time. The next morning, I got up early and went straight to the bank. First, I opened a new personal account. Then, I stopped all automatic transfers to her credit cards. Then, I froze the joint account that she had been freely spending from. By the time I left, she had exactly zero access to my money. And the best part? She didn't even know it yet. The first crack in her perfect little world came that afternoon. I was working from home when I heard her frustrated sigh from the kitchen. Then, her voice. Daniel. I took a sip of my coffee. Yeah. She walked in, holding her phone, looking mildly annoyed. I think there's an issue with the credit card. I blinked innocently. Oh, she sighed. Yeah. I tried to order a few things, but it kept getting declined. Can you check it? I leaned back. That's weird. Maybe the card is just maxed out. Her face dropped. Maxed out, she repeated. That's impossible. I shrugged. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you should check the bank statement. She frowned, still confused, but nodded and walked off. And that was just the beginning. Over the next week, everything changed. She tried to book a spa day. Declined. She tried to go out for a fancy brunch with her friends. Card error. She tried to do her usual online shopping spree. No funds available. One by one, her luxuries disappeared. And each day, Her frustration grew. But the real meltdown? That came when she finally checked the bank. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was on the couch, reading emails when I heard it. A sharp gasp from the other room. Then, footsteps. Fast, angry footsteps. She stormed into the living room, holding her phone, her face red with fury. "Daniel," she snapped. "What the hell did you do?" I looked up, pretending to be confused. "What do you mean?" She shoved her phone in my face. "The bank account. It's frozen. The credit cards aren't working. Where's the money?" I exhaled slowly. Then I set my laptop aside and met her gaze. "I moved it," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "You what?" "I moved it," I repeated. "Into an account you don't have access to." Silence. Then she laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was mocking. "You're joking," she said. I didn't blink. "I'm not." Her face dropped. Then she lost it. "You can't just do that," she shrieked. "That's our money." I leaned forward. "No, sweetheart. That's my money. The money I earned. The money I work for. The money you've been spending like it grows on trees." She sputtered. "Daniel, this is insane. How am I supposed to?" I raised a hand, cutting her off. "You said something the other night," I said. "Something that really stuck with me." She froze. I smirked. "You told me my job was to provide, and your job was to enjoy it." Her face twitched. "Well," I continued, "I've decided I don't want that job anymore." Silence. Complete, utter silence. And for the first time in years, she looked genuinely afraid. You can't just stop providing," she said weakly. "You're my husband." I nodded. "Yeah, but I'm not your bank." She swallowed hard. "You're punishing me." I shrugged. "No, I'm just setting boundaries." Her hand shook. But I need." "No," I cut in. "You don't need anything. You just want it. And for the first time, you're realizing that those things, they aren't free." She stared at me. And for the first time, I saw it. The truth. She didn't love me. She loved what I gave her. She loved the lifestyle, the convenience, the luxury. And now that it was gone, she had nothing. No skills, no job, no way to sustain herself. And that wasn't my fault. That was hers. She clenched her fists. "So what now?" she asked, voice shaking. I leaned back. "That's up to you," I said simply. "You can start contributing, or you can figure something else out." Her jaw dropped. You expect me to work?" I raised an eyebrow. "What else would you do?" Her face twisted in horror, like the idea of working for her own money was some kind of nightmare. And that told me everything I needed to know. This marriage, it was already over. She just didn't know it yet.
My wife stood there, staring at me like I had just told her to go live in a cave. "You expect me to work?" That sentence echoed in my head, not because it was surprising, but because it was so revealing. She wasn't upset about the money. She was upset about the effort it would take to replace it. And in that moment, I knew exactly how this was going to end. She scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're being ridiculous, Daniel." I tilted my head. "Am I?" She huffed. "Yes. This is petty and immature. You can't just cut me off because you're feeling moody." I laughed. "Moody? That's what you think this is." She waved a hand. "It's obvious you were just trying to prove a point. But fine. If this is some stupid lesson, go ahead. Let's see how long you last without me." I blinked. Because, wow, she actually thought I was the one who needed her. She actually thought I'd come crawling back once I realized what I'd lost. She had no idea that I had already made up my mind. This wasn't a test. This was the beginning of the end. And she was about to find out just how replaceable she really was. The next few weeks, brutal for her, peaceful for me. I want to work like normal. I kept paying for the essentials, the house, the utilities, the food, but everything else? Gone. No more luxury. No more shopping sprees. No more expensive brunches with her equally useless friends. And slowly, she started to crack. At first, she acted like she didn't care. She kept up appearances, posting pictures online like everything was still perfect, making sure nobody knew her entire world was falling apart. But behind the scenes, she was failing. I saw the little signs. The frustration when her card got declined. The confusion when her friends stopped inviting her out. The realization that she had no safety net. And the best part? She still refused to admit it. Then, the breakdown came. It happened on a random evening. I was watching TV when she walked in. She looked different, tired, like someone who was losing control and had no idea how to stop it. She hesitated. Then she sat down next to me and sighed. "Daniel," she said softly. I muted the TV, waited. She bit her lip. I think we need to talk." I nodded. "Go ahead." She let out a slow breath. "I don't like how things have been between us." I raised an eyebrow. "How things have been?" She nodded. "This tension, it's not good for either of us." I fought the urge to laugh. Tension? She was acting like this was some minor disagreement. Like we had argued over what to watch on Netflix, not the fact that she had been freeloading off me for years. But I played along. "All right," I said. "What do you suggest?" She straightened up, and then she went right back to manipulation. "I think we need a fresh start," she said. I tilted my head. "A fresh start?" She nodded. "Yes, a reset. We should go back to how things were." I smirked. "You mean when I was paying for everything?" Her face twitched. "I mean when we were happy." I leaned back. Because, wow, she was still trying to spin this. Still acting like this was a relationship problem instead of her problem. So I decided to be blunt. "Let me ask you something," I said. She swallowed. "Okay, if I turn your cards back on, if I start funding your life again, will you actually do anything different?" She blinked. "What?" I repeated myself. "If I start paying for everything again, will anything change?" She hesitated. Then she shrugged. "I don't know what you mean." And that told me everything. I sighed, standing up. She frowned. "Where are you going?" I shook my head. "Nowhere. I just finally see things clearly." She tilted her head. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" I exhaled. And then I said it out loud. "I don't think I want to be married to you anymore." Her entire body went stiff, like I had just slapped her across the face. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Finally, she let out a shaky laugh. "Daniel, stop. That's not funny." I kept my face blank. "I'm not joking." She stared at me. Then she panicked. No, no," she stammered, shaking her head. "You don't mean that." I nodded. "I do." She shot up from the couch. "This is because of the money, isn't it?" I shrugged. "That's part of it. But mostly, it's because I see you for who you really are." Her eyes widened. "And who is that?" she whispered. I smiled. "A woman who only married me for what I could provide." She gasped. "How can you say that?" I scoffed. "Because the second I stopped funding your life, you stopped caring. You didn't try to fix things. You didn't try to work things out. You just sat there, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to cave." Her hands trembled. "That's not true," she muttered. I crossed my arms. "Then prove it." She blinked. "What?" I gestured around. "Get a job. Help with the bills. Be a real partner instead of a leech." She froze. Didn't say a word. Because she couldn't. And that was the answer. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. She spun around. "Where are you going?" I smirked. "To talk to a divorce lawyer." She gasped. "No, Daniel, wait." I walked out. And for the first time in years, I felt free. She had trapped herself. And now, she was about to find out what life was like without me.
I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. My phone was already blowing up. Texts, calls, voicemails. I ignored every single one, because at this point, I didn't care what she had to say. She had years to act like a real partner, years to show that she cared about me, not just my money. And now that I was finally done playing her game, she was panicking. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I parked outside my lawyer's office and sat there for a second, letting it sink in. This was real. I was actually doing it. Walking away from a marriage I had invested so much in. A marriage I thought was real. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it never was. Because real love doesn't disappear when the money stops flowing. And my wife? She had checked out the second I cut off her luxuries. That told me everything I needed to know. So I got out of the car, walked into the office, and said the words I never thought I'd say. I want a divorce. The process started immediately. And the second the papers were served to her, the real meltdown began. It started with denial. She stormed into our house that night, slamming the front door so hard the walls shook. She threw the divorce papers onto the coffee table and crossed her arms. "This is a joke, right?" I didn't even look up from my laptop. Nope. She scoffed. Daniel, come on. You're not actually serious. I finally met her gaze. I've never been more serious in my life. Her face dropped because she finally saw it. I wasn't bluffing. I was done. And that scared her more than anything. Next came the bargaining. She started trying to negotiate, trying to spin the situation like it was just a small misunderstanding. Daniel, listen, she said a few days later, sitting across from me at the dining table. We don't have to do this. We can fix things. I leaned back. Ow, she swallowed. Then, she said the funniest thing I'd ever heard. I'll cut back on my spending. I laughed in her face. Because now she was willing to change. Now that she had no other choice. Now that she was about to lose the lifestyle she loved so much. I shook my head. Too little, too late. She gasped. You're really just going to throw this all away? I smirked. You threw it away first. She had no response, because she knew I was right. Then came the anger. She went from begging me to stay to full-blown rage mode. You're a selfish bastard, she screamed one night, throwing a glass against the wall. You're ruining my life over money. I smirked. That was rich. Funny, I said, because that's exactly what you did to me. She froze, because deep down, she knew it was true. She had treated me like a bank account, not a husband. And now that her bank was closing, she was losing it. Then came the desperation. She tried everything to make me change my mind. Suddenly, she was acting like the perfect wife, cooking me dinner, asking about my day, pretending she actually cared about me. But I saw right through it, because if I had turned the money back on, she would have gone right back to who she really was. This wasn't love. This was survival. She was fighting to keep the lifestyle, not me. And that made my decision even easier. The day she realized I was really leaving was the day she finally broke. She walked into the kitchen where I was packing some of my things, tears in her eyes. Daniel, she whispered. I didn't stop packing. She swallowed. I don't know what I'm going to do without you. I zipped up my bag and looked at her. You should have thought about that before you made me feel like a paycheck instead of a husband. She sputtered. I didn't mean it like that. I sighed. Yeah, you did. Then I picked up my bag and walked out the door.
I walked out of that house and didn't look back. Not at my wife. Not at the years I spent giving her everything. Not at the life I was leaving behind. Because in reality, I wasn't leaving a marriage. I was escaping a business deal where I was the only one paying. And now, she was about to learn what life was like without my money. For the first few days, I stayed in a hotel while I figured things out. I had already spoken to my lawyer. Everything was set in motion. Now, all I had to do was watch it unfold. And sure enough, it didn't take long for her to crumble. At first, she tried to act like she was fine, posting fake happy pictures online. Acting like this was just a minor bump in her perfect life. But behind the scenes, she was falling apart. 2 weeks after I left, my lawyer sent me an email. She had officially filed a response to the divorce. And guess what? She was demanding spousal support. I laughed, because of course she was. She didn't want me. She wanted my money. Even now, after everything, she was still clinging to the lifestyle, still thinking I owed her something. But she was about to find out how wrong she was. I met with my lawyer the next day. How strong is her claim? I asked. He smirked. Weak. She doesn't work, has no assets in her name, and you have a clear financial record showing that you covered 100% of household expenses. If anything, we can argue that she wasted marital funds on unnecessary luxury spending. I grinned, because that was perfect. The next few months were a battle. She fought tooth and nail to get as much money as she could. She tried painting herself as the victim. She claimed I was abandoning her. She even tried getting sympathy from mutual friends. But here's the thing. When you spend years bragging about how your husband pays for everything while you contribute nothing, nobody feels bad for you when he finally cuts you off. The final blow came during the last court hearing. She sat there, looking exhausted, because the truth, reality had finally hit her. She was about to lose everything. The house. Mine. I had bought it before the marriage. The assets? Locked down. The spousal support? Denied. All she got? Her personal belongings and a hard lesson in consequences. And the moment the judge made it official, She burst into tears. But at that point, I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just nothing. Because she had dug this hole herself. And now, she had to live in it. After it was all over, she tried one last time to fix things. She showed up outside my new apartment, crying. "Daniel, please," she begged. "I made a mistake. I didn't appreciate you the way I should have. But I do now. Please, let's start over." I stared at her for a long moment. Then, I smirked. "That's sweet," I said. Then I stepped back and shut the door in her face. Because that was her final answer. She had finally learned. When you treat someone like an ATM instead of a husband, don't be surprised when the machine stops working. 1 year later, I was sitting at a cafe when I ran into an old mutual friend. "Dude," he said, sitting down across from me. "You are not going to believe what I just heard." I raised an eyebrow. "What?" He grinned. "Your ex? She's dating some guy in his 50s. Super rich. Total sugar daddy situation." I chuckled. "Of course she is." He laughed. "Man, she really doesn't change, huh?" I shook my head. "Nope." And I couldn't care less. Because for the first time in years, I was truly free. And I had never been happier.